Welcome to the WriterDojo with your hosts, Steve Diamond
Buenos dias.
and Larry Correia.
Hola.
Today's episode, Q&A, Business and Marketing.
Larry, welcome back. I'm glad to have you back with me again today. Again, we're talking about all sorts of fun stuff on the WriterDojo, and I know that you, like I, are super appreciative of all of our freaking awesome supporters.
We get some great supporters, and they send us really good questions.
Exactly. And so today, what I want to talk about is some of these questions. Now, we had two questions from a couple of our supporters, Brennan and his brother, whose name I can't remember for the life of me. Aaron. That's what it is. So Brennan and Aaron, they sent in questions that actually were the same. It's basically, they were both asking the same question.
Very similar, yeah.
It's almost like they're twins or something.
Yeah, interesting.
Here all week. All right. So the gist of it, I'm not going to read the whole thing.
So this episode, though, we got some business questions, and we got one that's kind of a marketing question, so it's kind of related.
So business and
A
marketing.
little bit of writing about length, but then, we basically have like three different questions today.
Yeah. Okay. But the first one we want to tackle has to do with, this is just straight up business. Okay. This is nuts and bolts business, where Brennan and Aaron have received some pretty bad advice. So the gist of it, I'm not going to read the whole thing. The gist of it is, they've started receiving money for some short story sales. Kudos.
That's awesome.
Kick butt, right?
That's
High fives.
great.
And they went and had their taxes done at H&R Block. And that's the first problem.
Okay, Steve and I, guess, background, we were both professional accountants before we were
Right.
writers.
And so we've dealt with the bad, quote unquote, professional accountants at H&R Block, and we've dealt with the good accountants at like CPA firms.
Yeah.
And we've done our own taxes, yada yada. Okay, the whole gamut.
Yeah.
We've done everything.
Corporate taxes.
We've done corporate taxes. We've been audited
So
gajillions of times.
So many times by so many entities.
Uh-huh. And so what the person did, what this kind of sort of tax person told either Brennan or Aaron, was that because that they might be in some hot water with the IRS for not registering themselves as a business while submitting these stories for publication. And there's an implied threat in here from the tax guy on behalf of the IRS, basically saying like, well, you have to register as a business right now or you're going to be screwed. And
no,
that's bullcrap.
yeah, no.
That's bullcrap. So Brennan and Aaron, don't listen to that dude. He's a terrible accountant. Go somewhere else. I don't know. I don't know if they're local. Are they local to us?
No.
They're not local to us?
Somewhere in the West.
Okay.
Wyoming or Montana.
If you guys were super local to us, we could have recommended you actually a really good place.
Yeah, if you're in Utah, we have a CPA firm we recommend to all the writer friends we know.
Exactly.
Actually, we both use the same one, right?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
So here's the trouble. People that work at H&R Block in places like that, they're not really any better than me or you just doing our taxes on TurboTax at home. They're not any better than that.
Well, because what this comes down to is what the IRS actually cares about is are you paying taxes on your income?
That's right.
And so if you have sold a short story, if you sold a couple short stories, you've made a few $100, you're not going to go incorporate yet.
Right.
But here's the thing, just put that on your taxes. Just
report it.
Just report it. Report the income, pay
It's
the
such
taxes.
especially when it's a small amount. You got to understand the way the tax code in the U.S. works. When it's very small amounts of money, there's almost no tax on it. The way the tax code scales, the more money you make, the more taxes you pay. Okay. And so when you make almost nothing on it, it doesn't really move the needle one way or the other.
Yeah, now we talked about this a little bit in our episode, our first business episode. What's going to happen is you're going to incorporate when it's a benefit to you.
Correct.
And so that's when you're going to want to form a business entity. That's where, honestly, I would recommend going and meeting with a CPA. They can walk you through all the steps.
It's really easy to set yourself up as a business.
Yeah, they'll walk you
very
through the
easy.
steps because you'll need to file paperwork with a few different things depending on your state. You'll usually have a state office of corporations of some kind. You'll need to file with your state tax agency. You'll probably need to file maybe with your county or jurisdiction you live in.
Yeah, probably.
I think because like for your property taxes, because they'll want to know. But the thing is, almost I can't speak for every jurisdiction in America, obviously, but because some of there's California and whatnot. Honestly,
the cesspit of all
when
business.
we used to do when Steve and I worked for the same defense contractor, we would have like books of rules for various states, and they're like the width of your finger, and then there was California, it was like 4 phone books stapled together. It's just awful. But so basically, you're gonna incorporate, you're gonna fill out this paperwork, and that's gonna give you a tax benefit, and that's where your writing will be through the corporation, and then your corporation will pay you.
Exactly. The whole point of incorporating is to receive a sort of tax break and to offer yourself legal protection.
Yeah, it's a separation of you as an individual from a separate business entity that conducts business.
Right. So here's the thing. If, say you were Brandon Sanderson, we talked about Brandon Sanderson earlier. Now that dude definitely has a CPA doing his crap.
Oh, jeez.
If he doesn't, I'd be absolutely shocked.
I'm sure he
definitely does.
Yeah.
But say he didn't, he could still do it okay.
Yeah, as long as he declares that income.
As long as he declares all that income, he's okay. Now he's going to get completely hosed on taxes because of the quantities of money he's making.
Yeah, I'd say that's top bracket.
That's beyond. Yeah, that's easily top bracket. But he doesn't have to. Like he could, as long as he is honestly reporting all of that stuff. And at that levels, he'd probably get audited.
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But once you start,
can you imagine being like some just dude filing your 1040 and under miscellaneous income?
you put $40 million
in miscellaneous income. I guarantee an auditor is going to crash through your skylight having rappelled from a helicopter.
They're like either he's a drug dealer or he's a terrorist. One of the two.
Yeah, no, yeah. But no, honestly, that's actually a really good question. And my biggest thing, I don't have an exact number to give people when they should.
The last number I heard,
for me, it was like 30 grand.
I think it was 30.
That's when I did it.
And I believe that the dudes at the CPA firm that you and I know, I believe they echoed that to me a little while later. Yeah. It was somewhere around between 30 and 50 is what they said. So
this was like, geez, like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I think I got to I was making about 30,000 in writing income, and that's when I incorporated.
Yeah. Now the whole reason, now specifically most authors, most authors, I can think of some other scenarios, but this is what CPAs are for, but neither of us are CPAs and don't take this as actual legal advice.
That's true. This is just two guys talking. This is just not legal advice.
Just two dudes chatting. Our only advice is that you go talk to a CPA. You incorporate doing as an S corp. It's a very specific type of legal entity.
It's a small corporation.
Correct. And what this does, the whole point in doing this is so that when you make money as a corporation, the corporation itself doesn't really get taxed because it's all passed through to the individuals underneath it. Okay. The employees are basically the shareholders. Okay. Now you can be an S corp and you be the only the 100% shareholder. So by default, all of the corporation's income is passed on to you.
Yeah.
But what this distinction does, guys, is it prevents you. Think of your day jobs. Okay. On your day jobs, your W-2 employee, you get your check. And the first thing you notice is you were supposed to get $1,000, but instead, because of taxes, you got like $3,000.
Withholdings.
Because withholdings.
Yep.
Okay. We're talking, and the main ones that the S Corp impacts, we're talking about Medicare and Social Security. Okay.
Ficka futta sutta.
Yep. And what all of this does is, in a normal job, there's a total burden of about, I think it's like 15 or 16% of total burden of tax that is owed to the government out of your pay. In a regular job where you're a W-2 employee, the employer pays half of that on your behalf, and you pay the other half out of your paycheck.
Yep.
Okay.
When you're a corporation,
when you are If you are just a regular 1099 employee, say you do $600 of work for your buddy, and he pays you, and you have, because it's over $600, you therefore have to report it as a 1099 on your taxes, because that's the cutoff for the IRS guys. If it's just to you yourself and you are paying self-employment tax, which is the full 15 or whatever 16%. No one is paying half of that on your behalf.
Yep, that part sucks.
But
especially when you first do it.
But when you're an S corp, you bypass that self-employment portion of the tax.
All right, I'm thinking here. I'm not sure. Are you?
That for the shareholders.
Okay. Now keep in mind, I haven't been an accountant for like way longer than Steve, so he's right. I'm going with whatever Steve says.
Yeah. Now, I mean, there's always weird things going on and stuff, but in general, the whole point of this of incorporating as an S corp is so that when the pass-through income comes to you, it isn't given to you like you're self-employed. Okay, so you're avoiding some of the double taxation that comes with being just a regular schmo.
Yeah, this is also for the first $120,000.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yes,
something like that of your income.
Yeah, and all of those weird cutoffs and everything. I don't freaking know those.
Which honestly, guys, if you're making 120 grand off your writing, you
better be incorporated.
Definitely need to be incorporated at that point.
But in general, the whole gist of this, and look, some of my data could be a little wrong. Whatever.
Yeah, because I'm trying to remember. It's been too dang long.
It's been too long.
Because honestly, guys, I actually take great deal of pride in doing my own taxes, having been an accountant and as a writer. But then I got to the point where I was losing money by not having a CPA, because CPAs keep up on the changes, and something changes every year.
When it comes to tax law, it changes daily.
Yeah, it's horrible. Just honestly, guys, if you're making decent money at this and it's getting to where you're thinking about you need to like do this as a job and switch over to being a writer, you definitely need to incorporate.
Now, the other portion of this is you've got to understand when it comes to all this tax crap that, again, it changes so frequently, and the laws will change here and there. At the day job, we were dealing with a law that literally changed from one day to the next, and it completely radically changed the way we're filing taxes in a certain state. Yeah,
and if you're doing business in 4 or 5 different states, it gets so complicated.
So at the end of the day, the gist of this is when you're just starting out, man, you don't need to register. Don't let some flunky at H&R Block tell you that you're going to be in trouble.
No, you're still good.
Yeah. Now, if you received any royalties and you're like, I'm not reporting these royalties, they're not very much, that's a bad thing.
Now, as me and Steve have said before, taxation is theft, but they're still going to throw you in jail if you don't let them steal from you. So you need to pay your taxes.
Well, and one of the interesting things, so 1099s, basically that means you're not an official W-2 employee of a company, but you still do work for them and they pay you.
You're a contract.
You're a contract employee. Yeah. Contract. Whatever.
Which is how most writers are when we collect
in general
income.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. So you receive that. In general, if you're just a random Joe Schmo consultant, I do some financial consulting on the side here and there for governments. Once you make over $600, the company is supposed to give you a 1099 form that says how much you made. Okay. And then, but here's the thing. Royalties doesn't matter. There's no threshold. You're supposed to report all royalties. So even if it's $12, you still got to report it. Which is why, to the point of the email, Aaron and Brennan, $500, yeah, just report it as income. It's not going to make a big difference. It's cool. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get more into, there's a small writing question, and then we're going to talk about some marketing stuff, because y'all have heard enough about accounting and that crap's boring. We'll see you.
Juwan Washington was left for dead on the battlefield. Unfortunately for him, things only got worse. Sol is nothing more than a token curiosity. He is taken far from Earth and into a part of the galaxy where mankind has yet to tread. Various alien races sell him for goods, luxury items, or rot-gut alien alcohol. Finally landing in a mercenary pit somewhere on the galactic fringe, he is alone, forgotten, and destitute. But fate wasn't through with Juan just yet. When two strange aliens offer him a way out and possibly a way back home, he jumps at the opportunity. Along the way, he discovers that there are more important things in the universe. Things like honor, courage, and vengeance. From Jason Cordova and Matt Novotny, coming April 29, 2022. The Executioners, available exclusively on Amazon.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I know we were talking about how boring accounting stuff is, but during the break, Larry and I ended up just talking about accounting because we can't help it.
Yeah, because we were like, I couldn't remember how something worked, and then we went off, and then it turned into us like tax planning for other writers that we know, like what we would do to.
We're like, we need prepaid liabilities on the thing. We need. Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, because we just recorded the Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter episode. So, like, during the break was me and Steve's tax plan if we were Brandon with $42 million in cash that we all of a sudden need to, like, because he needs to, like, get that stuff sunk into things right now because his tax bill is going to be insane.
It's going to be mind-breaking.
Yeah. So, I hope he's got a great CPA.
Oh, man, I hope so.
I'm sure he does. Okay.
All right. So our next question, it's a two-part question. It's from the same guy. I think it's a guy. I don't know. I don't want to judge. Dude or gal, whatever, has got a badass name though.
I'm not a biologist.
So the name is the person's name is Sharang Inamdar. I don't know how I'm pronouncing that, but anyway, the way it looks super freaking rad.
Actually, Sharang, if you would like me to use your name in Son of the Black Sword, I totally will.
Yeah.
So if you
just need your permission, bro.
I need your. So if you're cool with that, I will totally use your name.
Because that name is perfect and it's freaking rad.
That's a rad name. Yeah.
So I don't remember if I've talked about this. I think I talked about this on one of our episodes where
about naming people,
about how I name people. And for a long time, what I would do is when I got spam email, I would just take the super absurd names and I would keep them because they were often pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so so this isn't a spam email, but still really cool name. Anyway. Thank you, Sharang. Okay, so Sharang has two questions. The first part is actually like a writing advice question. And then the second part has to do with marketing on the whole. So I want to start with the writing one so that we end with marketing. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
All right. So his writing question is, I have a problem feeling like I tend to write too short. I think I'm instinctively scared of writing in too much detail and end up overcompensating. I wanted to know how to tell if you are giving too much detail and if you are in danger of boring the reader.
That's a really good question.
It's a great question. And now, Larry, you know that you know how I write. I write super terse.
Yeah, and I'm pretty terse too. I'm not a super descriptive writer.
Exactly. So this is a really interesting question for us.
Because we're both on the lower description side of the spectrum.
Now, the way I look at it is I'd rather write terse and get the crap on the page and then go back in and say, where have I not been clear enough? And then add to that.
Over time, I've gotten to where I edit less and I write more. So I spend more time writing and less time editing because that's just funner. So I'm a little more careful in the first draft. However, my rule of thumb on this, you're too terse when they're confused.
Okay.
Or if it's too blank. So if like they don't know what's going on and the character is like a blank person and they're in a blank room.
A blank mannequin in a white room.
A blank mannequin in a white room, you need more.
Yeah.
If your characters don't have anything to differentiate them other than a name, you need more. If your places all feel the same, you need more. So if the reader is ever confused by the blankness, you need more. You need to write longer. As far as writing too long, is the reader bored?
Yeah.
That's the main thing. Now, how do you avoid that, or how do you learn? This is something you're going to learn with practice. You can also learn by having people read your stuff.
Well, and I think it's going to depend on kind of what kind of thing you're writing.
Oh, yeah, true. It depends on the genre.
Yeah, I mean,
like epic fantasy.
Yeah, I was gonna say me writing like a supernatural thriller is very different than Brandon writing his doorstop epic fantasies.
Yeah, so if you're writing doorstop epic fantasy, the readers are going to expect quite a bit of fluff and descriptive stuff. If you're writing like a big space opera, the people are going to kind of expect more world building. If you're writing hard sci-fi, they're going to expect more details.
You best have a degree in physics.
Yeah, exactly. So like a David Weber novel, no one's ever accused a David Weber novel of being terse. Or as David Weber said one time on a podcast with me, David Weber will never use 3 words when 5 will do, and Larry Correia will never use 3 words when 1 will do.
Right.
And so it's just, they both work though.
Oh yeah.
So so honestly, Shrang, the answer to that, there's not really a right answer. The main thing is like, make sure you give the people enough meat that there's something to bite into. There's got to be enough there that they can picture the scene in their head, then they can picture the characters and who they are. And so if you need to fluff that up to do so, do it.
Well, and this is what pre-readers are for, right? You know, especially when you're new, getting a 1 or 2 pretty decent pre-readers can kind of help you through the ABCs of your story.
Well, we talked about that in the episode where we talked about like writing groups and readers, but one of the things is when I have people read my stuff, especially when I was starting out, I wouldn't have 1 or 2 people read my stuff. I'd have 10.
Yeah.
Or 14.
Yeah.
And because what I was looking for, I wasn't looking for like if one person said, well, I was bored here, or one person I was confused here, that doesn't matter. But if 7 or 8 of them were like, I didn't know what was going on in this scene, I definitely need to fix that.
Well, and man, you never know. I mean, you never know how people are going to behave. Now, the other part of this is when there's a danger here, and that's when you're too close to your story, because I know how I feel. Look, if I'm writing an action scene, I don't care. I don't worry about the action scene, and you're pretty much the same way. The action scenes kind of sort of write themselves for me.
Usually, yeah.
I mean, there are always difficult ones, especially if I'm thinking of like where people are positioned and yada, yada.
Yeah, the more complicated the scene, the more words I have to put into establishing that kind of thing.
But, that's the fun part. That's the enjoyable part. But when I'm writing, people, they're traveling down the road, but they have to have a meaningful conversation, or I'm having to shove in world building into a scene where there's not explosions happening. Those scenes, they write themselves slower. Like I write slower for that scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a danger there. There's a psychological danger. And that's, it's taking me really long to write this scene. Therefore, it's a really slow scene.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's too wordy. I'm doing too much. I need to cut this back. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yes, you know how long that scene took to unfold, but the reader does not.
No, maybe it took you 3 hours to write that scene, and the reader's going to read it in 10 minutes.
Yep.
And for them, it's just a slippery slope that's done and you're through it. And they don't think twice about it. They're like, yeah, nice pacing.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I always asked when my first book came out. I always asked people like, well, what did you think of the pace of the book? Because there were sections of that book where, man, I felt like I was slogging.
I think I read it in one night.
Oh yeah. It was only 70,000 words.
Yeah. I think I read it in one night. Yeah.
And that's in general, that's what happens. Most people read it in 1 or 2 sittings, maybe 3. But I always ask because, and I know you've written some scenes like this too, where you just feel like it's a freaking slog. You're like, oh my gosh, I just need to get through this scene so I can get to the next action scene or I'm going to murder someone in real life.
Yeah, honestly, usually it's a scene because there's some sort of challenge. To me, there's usually like some sort of emotional note that I'm trying to hit just right. And so I tend to agonize more as I write it. And it's like you said, that scene might seem really long to me because I put work into it, but to the reader, that's a 5-minute read.
Well, and no one has ever. I mean, I've read a lot of your reviews, obviously, and I've read a lot of my reviews. Very, very rarely does someone say, "Oh, this was just a really slow book." It doesn't happen.
No, that's not a criticism.
Even though I know I have, and I know you have. There's parts in while we're writing where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to murder someone.
I think I've seen that criticism out of like 250,000 reviews or whatever I have now that I have actually had somebody say that, but it was like kind of an anomaly. And like that guy's on speed, that dude's like flaming on meth or something. He's like, this is slow. It's like, okay, man. All right. Just Stay cool. Stay cool. So, I mean, I have seen that, but not very often.
All right. So, Shrang, that's the answer to your first question.
Yes, that's the writing portion. Now, marketing.
Marketing. And this question's really interesting, Larry. First of all, he compliments Servants of War, which is always good.
Thank you.
High five to us. And then he says, he's talking about how he's like a super avid fan of science fiction and fantasy. But prior to, he discovered the book through listening to the podcast.
That's cool.
Okay. Super rad. 1, thank you for listening to the podcast. And then 2, thank you for, buying the book for the ad that Jack recorded for us for it.
I think, I love the ads. The ads are cool.
But then he says, before he listened to the podcast, he hadn't heard about the book coming out. And then he said, he specifically targeting you because you're a pretty well-known name.
Yeah.
How is it that he hadn't heard about it because of how well-known you were?
That's a good question.
And then, he just wants to, he was curious because he feels like the book should be much more widely read than the appearances of it are.
Oh, believe me and Steve agree.
And we agree. We agree 100%. Now part of this, Shrang, and to anyone who maybe happen to have the same question, man, sometimes frickin' life is stranger than fiction.
Well, book marketing is a crapshoot. And so what happened?
You never know.
So with Servants of War, we actually the book came out the same week as World War III.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic timing on a book starring a bunch of people from pseudo-magical Russia and Slavic countries invading each other.
Yeah.
Our timing was impeccable.
Yeah, the day that Putin declared war on Ukraine.
So that is a little bit of an overshadow. Now, as far as how stuff appears in various marketing thing, that's such a weird thing because every publishing house has marketing people.
Yeah.
And those marketing people work all the time trying to figure out a way to get books out there. And here's the kicker. Some publishing houses spend a insane sum of money to try to get a book to be a hit, and it fails.
Oh, yeah.
Other times they spend almost nothing, and it's a huge success.
Right.
Baen, our publisher, is pretty chill. Okay, so they're not a flighty publisher. They tend to kind of go slow, steady, and they're always trying new things.
I think they tend to play the long game a little bit more than trying to get the flash in the pan.
Well, because there's some publishing houses, and we can name some authors that we know where they got on a publishing house. The publishing house spent very little marketing on them and just basically throws spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks.
Yeah, and because the movie or because the book didn't get turned into a TV series or a movie immediately, they were like, "Well, it's a failure."
Yeah, that's
huge. That's huge in YA.
We spent almost no money on you at all, and your book didn't sell that good. Bye.
Weird.
Yeah, it's you didn't promote it at all.
Exactly.
Then they have other writers, and they say, well, this writer is going to be the next big thing. So they spend $1 million marketing this book, and the book sells okay. Well, of course it does, because they're spending $1 million on it. What was the actual profit margin on that book? Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
And there's some other writers that me and Steve can name.
Well, and from a financial perspective, they're looking at it thinking, well, hey, if we spend $1 million on this marketing, not only is it going to help this current book, but it might help the other books that this author has written, and it might help the future books that this guy will put out.
Yeah.
So it's not, in a lot of cases, it's not like it's just a political mumbo jumbo, though there are those cases.
There's some where I know where there's some particular authors that, for whatever reason, the publishing house has glommed onto them that this writer is who we think is going to be the next big thing. So they spend a fortune on them, but then you look at the book scan numbers, and it's like
it doesn't really track.
It's like, well, they sold 20,000 copies. That's great. That's like, if they do that in a week, that's bestseller territory.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's great, Except it's like when you see how hard they pushed this person, they still lost money on them.
Oh yeah.
So
at that point, they have to be hoping that marketing push will not only help the book right at that moment, but it'll help it have a longer tail, and it'll help future books.
The one that kills me is then I go to bookstores and I see that person that they pushed that hard, and they got the giant displays, because all those displays you guys see in bookstores, the big
dumps.
displays,
They're called dumps.
Those are paid for by the publisher.
Yeah.
The publisher cut a deal with that bookseller to get that. And then the sad thing is when you go in a couple months later and all those books,
they're on the remaindered list.
They're in a giant pile,
Yeah.
80, 90% off.
Yeah, they're $5.
Yeah.
bargain bin,
It's
yeah.
like $2.99 for a hardcover.
Yeah.
That's sad. So on the marketing thing, so what happens when you get a guy like me? So I'm like Bayan's, I don't know if I'm not, David Weber's number one.
Oh, for sure.
By far. David's huge. And then I think I'm up in there somewhere probably.
Yeah, because you've got Weber, Ringo, Drake.
Yeah. Flint. Bujold, me.
Yeah, so you're up there.
I'm probably, I don't know where I am
You're
exactly.
definitely top 10.
Oh, I'm top 5.
Yeah, you're right there.
I might be top 3. So
maybe. Yeah.
Depends on what happens that year.
Sure.
Now, one of the things is so Bain's going to market me, but there's certain places they market to, certain places they buy ads always.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, so I'm looking at, like, I don't know where Shurang is from. If he's from the U.S. versus outside of the U.S., that definitely is going to have an impact on the type of marketing that you're hearing.
Well, one thing I say is, so there's paid for ads,
yeah.
Okay, that our publishing house will aim at. But then there's like the independent places, they choose what they are and aren't going to review. Now, my problem there is because and this screws Steve, my co-author, but I'm very politically outspoken, and how it works is most of those places are the opposite of me. So several years ago, this is actually like 7 years ago now, I raised a stink in the publishing business about the political bias.
Right.
And I said that, the review places, if you have the wrong politics, the review places like don't review you as much. Right. But if you have the right politics, or, in this case, the left politics, you'll get reviewed in all these places. And so this one fanzine kind of book blogger didn't believe me. They thought I was full of crap. So they picked me, and they picked another author who has the polar opposite of my politics. Mm-hmm. And they went through, and I think they checked like 30 of the big review places. And because me and this other author had both had books come out within a few weeks of each other. We were both bestsellers. Like on the book scan numbers, we were fairly close. Okay. Mm-hmm. Only his publishing house threw a lot more money at him than mine does. And we were fairly close though. So they took these two books and they compared them over these review places. And I think he got reviewed at like 28 out of 30. And I had gotten reviewed at 2. And that's just how it is, but that's okay because I get most of my marketing, like the last episode, we talked about the power of fans, word of mouth. Mm-hmm. By far, most of my marketing comes from my fans talking about stuff. Oh, yeah. So if you look at that, so actually we were talking about the experiment Bayan did a little while ago.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so here's an interesting one. So Sean at Bayan and Jason at Bayan, Jason Cordova and Sean Korsgaard, were doing a little experiment because they were looking at some other publishing house that had tried to get a book to trend on Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to get a book to trend on Twitter.
It turns out, yeah.
Because, well, let's be honest, most of Twitter is illiterate. So it's not a shocker there. But this other publishing house had actually hired or paid or bribed, I don't know what they did.
They pay influencers and yada.
So they got some so they have these stats where they got these big influencers to like talk about the book. So they could see, and they have the hashtag of the book name. And they looked and they said, okay, so this got like millions of views because they had gotten these big influencers to talk about it. But then there was nothing after. Like, so people didn't retweet it. People didn't talk about it. People didn't have conversations. So it had really low engagement. So they had spent a bunch of money to try this thing to get a book to trend. So Bayan was like, Larry, you got some pretty hardcore fans. What if you just tried to get your fans to get a book to trend and just by talking about it? And so I just went, and the funny thing is I was actually banned from Facebook where most of my fans are at the time. So as an experiment, we was like, let's see if we can't get hashtag Servants Award trend. And we did not, but it was actually really interesting.
It was pretty close. We could have with
if
just
more
a couple small
had,
changes.
Honestly, if we'd had like another 100 people, we were like right there. But the funny thing is, so we did this. We spent zero money.
Oh, $0. I was answering the questions from a concert.
Yeah, and so it was basically just me and Steve answering questions on Twitter and trying to get people to use the hashtag and just starting conversations and making jokes and answering questions about the book. And at the end, we looked at the stats of us versus the place that had paid the big influencers. We crushed them in every metric.
Oh, yeah.
Except for initial views. Mm-hmm. Because they had hired people with millions of followers.
Exactly.
And so the funny thing is, so this is a weird thing about book marketing. On one hand, we had a publisher who spent money on this project and got zilch, and then you had us who spent nothing and got more.
And so, I mean,
neither one of us trended.
Yeah.
But it's like we actually got a much better return on just people having fun. So book marketing is such a weird hit or miss thing.
Well, and you just never know what the environment's going to be.
Well, we're actually going to have...
So here's what happened during that time, okay? So let's talk about all the weirdness that happened right around book release. So we had book release and World War III started at the same time.
I was banned from the one place most of my fans are.
You got banned the morning the book came out.
I hadn't even done anything wrong.
Every time we did anything publicly with it, it was like magic. Brandon, during his $40 million Kickstarter, would go online and just monopolize the entire universe.
Oh my gosh, our timing was so perfect.
What the crap is happening?
Yeah.
And look, we're still at the tail end of like weird COVID crap. And
print book sales
are down across the board.
Yeah, print book sales are across the board just down. The whole industry is weird and depressed on that front.
And so my point here is that, man, you just never know.
No, actually, we're going to do some episodes.
It feels like freaking like voodoo with like chicken guts and
it does. And honestly, because like you talk to Bayan's chief marketing person, Corinda, and it's just like roll the bones and read the chicken guts. You just go for it and see what you can get. It's such a weird crapshoot. And there's this entire book marketing industry.
And yet, if you go anywhere and look at our reviews for Servants of War.
Oh, they're spectacular.
They're freaking amazing.
We got really good reviews, yeah.
And the thing that I'm noticing from most of the reviews is everyone's talking about how, this is a much darker book than Larry's Norm. And I'm like, totally. Have you met me?
I teamed up with a horror writer.
But they almost all point out like how good the characters are. They talk about how crazy the ending is.
All the stuff we've talked about on this show.
Oh yeah.
About
crazy,
delivering
right?
a good book.
And I mean, we're sitting at, close to 300 reviews on Amazon at the moment as of recording.
Yeah.
And we have dang near a 5-star average, which is crazy.
4.8
it's
or
like
something.
4.8, which is
I've
crazy.
not even listened to the audiobook yet, but I hear it's really good too.
I haven't listened to it either. I'm too nervous.
Well, I hear this narrator is good. This is not like what happened to you last time.
I know, but I've still got PTSD from that.
Yeah.
If anyone knows a really good narrator for books, contact me.
We're actually going to do an episode. We're still trying to work the bugs out of getting people on as guests.
Yeah.
But we're going to actually do an episode about indie marketing because that's something that I am like a decade out of date, and Steve, so we're totally not our area, and so we were actually going to bring on people who are indie book people and who are very successful and get some tips for you guys on how they market.
Yeah. Now, the one thing, and I mentioned this in one of our previous episodes, it was, Sean from Bain, he did a little thing where he was on it was like a dark fantasy, like Facebook group, and someone asked about dark fantasy, saying like, hey, well, what should I read? I love dark fantasy. And he's like, well, frick, Steve and Larry's book is like the epitome of dark fantasy, but without going so hardcore grimdark that you feel like you need to slit your wrists afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And
don't get me wrong, I love Joe Abercrombie's books, but man, they're
pretty dark.
They're dark.
They're pretty dark. So, like Mark Lawrence or Scott Baker, I love all those guys, but I have to go read like Terry Pratchett after I've read those guys.
Yeah.
And so, the big thing here, Shirang, is if it was hard for you to find the book because of whatever weird voodoo circumstances conspired against us to make it so that it was a little bit harder for our book to go out, in spite of all of the crazy effort that Bain puts forward for us, because Bain's so freaking rad.
Yeah, they're great.
So if you're having the trouble, then maybe some of your friends are having the same trouble. Maybe your acquaintances are having the same trouble.
That's word of mouth.
Word of mouth sells a lot.
Huge.
When I used to work at a bookstore back in ye olden times, it was really interesting. If you were excited about the book and talked about it to people that came in, your likelihood of selling the book went up dramatically. And then if you could take that excitement, you could hand them the physical book and put it in their hand, kind of marketing psychology here. They started building a positive relation through emotion and excitement and stuff to the physical thing that they were holding in their hands, which they build a connection to, and they're more likely to read it, right? They're more likely to buy it. And they're also much more likely to recommend it to their friends. I can't tell you how many times I had people come in that were like regular customers for me. They would walk into the store, and if I wasn't there, they'd just turn around and walk out, wouldn't say anything. But if I was there, they would come in and they'd say, okay, Steve, you give good recommendations. What should I be reading? And I'm like, okay, well, you should be reading the new Steven Erickson, or the new Brandon, or Jim Butcher's latest, whatever. And I'd hand them the books. And then a little bit later, their friend would come in and say, hey, my friend said that you recommended a certain book by someone. I can't remember what it was. My friends so-and-so, they look like this. I'd say, oh yeah, I recommended them the new Steve Erickson book. Here's the first book in that series. Word of mouth is exceptionally powerful. When Brandon was a nobody author back in forever ago, what seems like an eon ago at this, several $40 million ago. Elantris had come out. He'd gotten some good buzz on it, got nominated for the Camel for it. And then Mistborn was going to come out. I was at the bookstore at a time, and I'd set up basically an event for Brandon and had gotten all of these people to pre-order the book of the first novel in the Mistborn series. I ended up having, 200 and some odd copies of the hardback pre-ordered. And it was so much that, Baker and Taylor and Ingram and stuff like that, they wouldn't fulfill the order. And I had to go directly to Tom Doherty over at Tor. And so they sent us cases of books. They were a little freaked out. They're like, are you sure you're going to move? Because this is a lot of books that we're giving you. We're like, it's fine. Just trust me. We sold all those copies. Okay. And then some. It was not a problem. But all of that started because, and this is where I don't normally pat myself on the back too much. Okay. I'm actually a halfway humbled kind of sort of person. But in this case, I spent months just talking up Brandon and talking up the new book that was coming. Cause I'd read it because I was a pre-reader for the first Mistborn novel. And so I knew what was coming and I was excited for it. And I generated so much buzz just through word of mouth. And then those people were generating buzz and they were coming in and asking to pre-order the book. For a new author, I mean, look, you've been to a lot of book signings, especially before you were a real author. If you are a real author, I'm not sure yet.
Still not.
A lot of your signings, you end up selling what? Dozen books?
Oh, when you're first starting out, yeah.
Maybe 5, 6 sometimes?
Yeah, when you're brand new, 5 or 6. I think the average book signing in America is still like 7.
Yeah. So again, this was before Wheel of Time. This is before any of this. Brandon had one book out. And I sold 200 plus hardcovers at his signing.
That's
because
huge.
of word of mouth.
Great signing.
Because of word of mouth. And so think about what that means to you guys. If, Larry and I were joking the other day, looking at the Facebook group, the Monster Hunter Facebook group, and we're like, dang, man, like if every single one of these people had bought it, like I'd already be writing the sequel.
Well, the people don't realize, so my fans don't, I don't think they grasp this, but I got 10,000 people on the fan page and they'll all buy a book, usually over time though. Mm-hmm. If I could get every single member of my fan page to purchase the book the week it comes out, I would be, you combine with all their other regular sales mm-hmm. around the country, I would be a top 3 or number 1 bestseller, depending mm-hmm. on what was out that week, every single time. New York Times would still not put me on the list.
Well, no, they don't matter though.
Yeah, New York Times doesn't put me on the list anymore, no matter what I sell. But honestly, I would be the number 1 bestseller every single time. Mm-hmm. If just the people on the fan page buy. And they all do, but they buy it over like a, 3-month period. And
Larry, I mean, your fans, as great as they are, and they're amazing fans. I mean, that's one of the things I've noticed with doing this podcast with you and now writing with you. I mean, I've kind of like surrogate, receive some of your fandom.
All my co-authors, all my collaborators, I'm like glom on there. The reason I collaborate is so in the hopes that my fans will find new authors.
And they do. And I've had a number of people approach me and just talk about that sort of thing. Like, hey, you're great. Awesome. Good job. I'm like, nah. But so all these, it's, your fans are not immune to, as great as they are, they're not immune to being burned by authors, because there's a number of big name authors that have burned readers.
Well, that's the thing. Collaborations tend not to sell as good as solo novels.
There's less trust.
Yeah.
And they've been hurt too much.
Yeah, so they're more hesitant. So like, and like, no offense to my collaborators, but like, if I write a book by myself and it comes out and it's a Larry Correia novel, then I will expect a certain level of sales. If I do a collaborative novel with another author who they don't know, then it tends to be a lower thing. Even if it's two good authors, it's like when I work with Ringo or John Ringo or Sarah Hoyt, that's another well-established author. Those still don't sell as good as my solo books.
Well, and you've got to wonder how much of that is impacted by, I mean, there's obviously they're thinking, oh, well, Larry didn't write any of this. He phoned this in. He just let them do all the work.
Which is funny because every single time they pick out the scene that they think is that, they're always every single time backwards.
Oh, yeah.
Every time.
Well, and for Larry's been pretty clear about this before, but I'll just reiterate. Like, Larry's super hands-on as a collaborator.
I'm not.
Yeah, you don't phone it in.
Yeah.
But how many of these big authors that have put out 5 books in their giant series and then just haven't written anything in the past 15 years?
Yeah, we've joked on the show about James Patterson before, has a basement full of writers chained to computers, you know, that he just stamps.
Yeah, I mean, him and Nora Roberts and probably Brandon Sanderson at this point.
If he wanted to, he totally could.
So, there's so many factors that go into book marketing. And so I guess Shreng, the big takeaway here is,
it beats me, man.
But
on that bombshell.
But if you like the book, like you say you do, and we, man, thank you so much for the kind words, first of all. Recommend it to your friends. If you have friends that trust your taste, recommend them our way. Recommend them to the other authors who you love, who aren't us. That word of mouth will help a lot, and it also helps Bane quite a bit. And so, just keep that in mind. This is all weird magic voodoo. We don't frickin' know. We just write the stuff and then hope and pray, and then hope that our supporters will ask us really good questions so that we can talk about it and say at the end of the day, that's all the time we have for you today. Thanks, guys.
WriterDojo is Steve Diamond and Larry Correia. Produced by Jack Wilder and Bear and Hare Studios. Theme song, Word Mercenaries by Craig Nivo. New episodes come out every Wednesday wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/WriterDojo, by leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on the Writer Dojo, email ads@writerdojo.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to questions@writerdojo.com.
Now, as me and Steve have said before, taxation is theft, but they're still going to throw you in jail if you don't let them steal from you. So you need to pay your taxes.